How's it going, New World? Sethphir here, and today we are going to be going over my ultimate healing guide for Mutated dungeons, which will be coming up shortly. This is going to teach you everything you need in order to go from normal mode to elite mode and level 10 and beyond. So first, we're going to break this guide down into 3 sections. The first section is going to be talking about stats and attributes. The second section will be talking about talents and weapon builds. And the final section, we will go over consumables as well as items. That will be going over weapons, armor, jewelry, all that good stuff that you will need to have in order to prepare for these expeditions. They are quite challenging, so keep that in mind. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the builds and the stats. So first, we'll go with attributes, and we'll take a look here. You can see that I have a nice, even, crisp looking 300 focus, as well as 160 constitution. The reason it's at 160 is because I will use a consumable to give me 40 con, the rabbit food, which will push me up to 200, which will give me the break point for increased armor, and you will need it. There are a lot of ranged damage dealers like archers and muskets, and they hurt so bad. You need physical armor, so make sure that you have this so that you do not drop instantly, causing your group to wipe. This is very important in the mutated dungeons because the higher you go, the more damage those mobs are going to start dealing, the more things that you're going to have to dodge, like hellfire and void zones and explosions all over the place. It's going to be chaos out there, so make sure you have this to keep your survivability up, as well as have a nice health pool. And then 300 focus will just give us a nice even round amount. I've never actually used this final perk talent, to be honest, because you have to hit absolute 0 mana to get this mana regen. So it's not important. What is important is our healing numbers, and our healing numbers are going to come from focus. So the more focus we have, the better, but we need at least 200 constitution just to kind of stay in the game, in my opinion. You can squeak down to 150 or 100 if you're a super skilled player and you're really banking on dodging literally everything, but it's gonna be a bit rough, so I'd recommend this for most cases, and especially when you get to the elite difficulties. I found myself really relying on this 200 stat here. There's a couple other things to note along the way. You will get mana for any group kill, as well as the duration on casted buffs and healing output. So everything along the focus line is going to be great for you. Not too much to be said there. That's very standard. Next, we're going to go into weapon builds. The weapons that we're going to be using is the Life Staff and the Void Gauntlet. So we're going to take a look at the Life Staff first. And this is the build we're going to be using. On the healing side, we have the Sacred Ground ability with all 3 of its bonuses, and this is very important. Blessed at the end, when enemies or allies are inside of Sacred Ground, rather, they're healed for 50% increased healing, which is crazy. So keeping this on top of your tank will keep him alive and healthy, while you can use your other abilities to top up your teammates, and it will be a good time for you there. We will also discuss perks later on, because there is a very important perk with this, but we'll get into that when we talk about items. And so on the left side tree, we do have a few passives that are very important. This one will give you cooldowns whenever you heal anybody below half, but it does have a cooldown itself. This will energize all your light attacks with 5% refresh or refund on your abilities when you land them. So light attacking is going to be something that you're going to be doing pretty much 24/7. And actually, to be honest, the Life Staff probably has the highest APM out of any weapon in this game. APM being actions per minute, which just means that you're going to be doing a lot of things constantly, right? The bottom here is just 5% incoming healing to your group, and the only other thing to note is that your light attacks will heal anybody that pass through them, so you're going to heal them for a small amount. It's very good, so getting a good positioning to line up to pass through your allies but hit the enemy is very important as a Life Staff user. Now we'll go into the Protector tree. We're going to take Orb of Protection, which provides a heal and an explosion radius and a Fortify buff to anybody hit for 10%. This is going to be very important because you need to mitigate the damage that your allies are tanking, not just heal it. This is going to be very strong when coupled with the bonuses. You're going to get a heal over time effect on that orb explosion, and you are going to get all of the benefits of the orb no matter what, as long as it hits an ally. So if you have the orb explode in that radius, you will gain the Fortify and the recovery as well. And then the final thing will make it have a big explosion and impact all allies within that radius. The other move that we're going to have is Beacon. Beacon is a very powerful healing projectile. It will attach to whatever it hits first, whether that be the ground or an enemy or an ally. It does do damage. It's a nice chunk of damage, just like Orb of Protection does, and we'll talk about that because healers do a lot of damage, and a good healer will pump out some serious DPS while keeping the group topped off, and you will be able to tell very quickly which is a good healer and which is a bad healer. So going into Beacon, we will take the 2 talents down here, which will increase the beacon's radius and allow it to last longer. The final talent is movement speed, which generally isn't the best. It's okay, but it's more of a PvP situation rather than a PvE one, and we're focusing on mutated dungeons here. The passives on this side, very important to play around, is Bend Light. Every time you dodge, you heal for 20% more on a 5-second timer, so you need to make sure that you dodge before you do any healing skills. This one over here, Protector's Touch, will allow all of your light staff, heavy, and light attacks to fortify you by 15% for 3 seconds, which is very important because this, coupled with the Orb Protection buff, which should be up all the time, means that you have constant 25% fortification, and you'll be taking less damage from everything, which is very good. The other talent will allow you to get 10% more healing if you have any sort of buff, which should be all the time. And the final talent will allow all of our buffs to last 20% longer, which means 20% longer heal over time from the Orb of Protection, as well as the duration on the Fortify and a couple other effects and goodies along the way. So this is going to be the build. I know it's a bit strange. Some people like this Divine Blessing. I find it's not good because an ally below half health is most likely dying and or dead anyways, and we want to stop them from being there in the first place, so having constant heal over times on them is going to be the way to go. I keep my team topped up majority of the time. They're constantly full as long as I don't have mobs on me or anything crazy like that. And the other side tree is just an extension of Light's Embrace, so nothing too much to worry there. So with this build, coupled with the perks that we're going to be going after, you will be healing all the time. Some of these abilities have slightly long cooldown, especially Beacon, but with the setup that we're going for, when we get into talking about items, you will be casting Beacon all the time. You can maintain 2, sometimes even 3 beacons out on the field at a given moment, and you can also have up to 2 sacred grounds on the field as long as you're connecting your ranged attacks onto enemies and constantly refreshing your cooldowns, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the gameplay at the end here. So next we're going to go into the secondary weapon for the life staff, which is going to be the Void Gauntlet. As you can see, we have some stuff on the decay tree over here. This is a little bit different from my initial build. When I was playing in speed runs, I used Void Blade a lot, but now in the mutated dungeons, I have found out that that does not work. You will die, and you will also beat another melee to add to the melee cluster pile that will inevitably get exploded by all the mechanics and bombs being dropped by these crazy mutated monsters. So being out of melee range is golden. You definitely want to do that. So we're going to take all of the abilities that will help support our allies, as well as a powerful move on the right side called Orb of Decay. This move, I overlooked it at first when the Void Gauntlet came out, but this thing is crazy. It does good damage in a line, and it also applies a rend debuff and dot damage over time. But more importantly, it heals all allies for 20% weapon damage every second for 5 seconds, so that's a 100% scaling heal, and it scales better with focus, which means it's going to be very powerful. So moving on, we have the addition add-ons for here. You're going to get mana every time you hit an enemy for this, and in the mutated dungeons, you will see a lot of enemies. It's not very uncommon, especially in Dynasty Shipyard, to shoot an orb into a pack or a group of like 7 to 10 monsters. So if you hit all of those, you're going to get a big mana refund, and then we're going to take this other talent that will allow us to have our orb slowing enemies for a duration, which will trigger the strength bonuses for the strength users, as well as make it easier to maneuver around. So this is a nice talent to have. And the final talent is going to be a bit of a picky talent. This is called the Detonating Orb. You will be able to press the Q button again to explode it. When it comes out, it is a damaging ability. If you press Q, it will explode into a damaging radius, but when it returns back, it will heal people. If you press Q, it will explode in a healing radius around the orb. It's very picky. I usually don't detonate this a lot of times. It's just, for now, it's a dead talent, and it's something we have to take because everything else is so much worse, and we just want to get down to the final talent. So just deal with it as is, but just keep in mind that you most likely will not be detonating majority of your orbs. The next thing we have to discuss is a few of the passives. This Radiant Efficiency will allow you to reduce the mana cost by 25% if you're above half mana, which is fantastic. This next talent is very important and will be played around heavily. This is going to be Refreshing Harvest. So for every tick that your Void Gauntlet left click does, it's going to steal life from you and give you mana back. But when it does that, it's going to reduce all cooldowns by 10%, which is very good because you can get things like Oblivion back up and your other skills. So this is a very strong passive to have. And then finally, we just have a little Mending Evasion down here. When you dodge with a Void Gauntlet with full mana, you're going to get healed up. So it's a mechanic that you could do. It's kind of useful, but the other options are just really bad. They're all about doing range damage with auto attacks, and that's not something you do with the Void Gauntlet, especially while healing in these dungeons. So next ability we have is Essence Rupture. It is going to fire projectile and give a debuff to the enemy, and anybody who hits that enemy will life leech 20% of the damage that they do. That is a fantastic ability. The talents will allow you to regenerate stamina for the targets hitting that monster, which is very powerful, especially for tanks and DPS. And then the final ability will allow you to heal 80% of your weapon damage when the rupture ends for everybody around the ruptured target. This is also fantastic for keeping up groups and just adding extra healing. The final ability is going to be Glimpse of the Void. Whenever we cast 4 or more spells, our next ranged heavy attack will instantly reset all Void Gauntlet cooldowns and remove all stacks of the stacked up effect from the abilities. So it can be a nice mechanic to play around. Once you get 4 stacks, you can do a quick partially charged heavy attack to refund all your cooldowns and shoot out another orb, shoot out an Oblivion, shoot out an Essence Rupture, whatever you want to do. Next, we'll go into the left side tree, which is Annihilation. We're going to take all of the passives that have to do with crit chance, crit damage, as well as damage above mana cost, and empowering when you're close or casting spells near enemies. And then finally, we'll take this Refreshing Frailty ability. This is very powerful. It's going to refresh cooldowns by 5% on all abilities when you hit enemies afflicted by 3 or more debuffs. And that can be from different debuffs as well, so it doesn't just have to be you. So anything from Orb of Decay will count. Anything from an Essence Rupture will count. Anything from your allies like a Sunder Armor, all of that stuff counts. So you most likely will be triggering this ability. And then we have the bread and butter of this kit, which is going to be powering up your allies. Positioning with this will be crucial, but if you use it correctly, you will be increasing your group's damage by a lot. It is going to place down a zone around you, which does damage, but empowers everyone in that zone for 6 seconds by 20% buff. This is going to be huge. You could drop it next to your teammates and then quickly use it and then get back to healing. And it is going to power up your team a lot. Having good Oblivion cooldown management within your group and constantly having Oblivion up between you and the mage will be very important into timing a lot of these higher mutations, especially the hard difficulty ones. Next, we have the buff for it, which is going to allow your attacks to weaken targets inside the radius. It's okay. It's not something we're going to be doing too much, but when you pass an orb through a group that's within the Oblivion, it can trigger. But the final talent is what we're after. It's going to recover 15 stamina per second for anybody inside of the Oblivion, which means your tank's going to get stamina back, and he's going to be constantly topped off and being able to block everything. It's going to be a fantastic move. So now that we have discussed weapons, we're going to go ahead and go into consumables and itemization. So we'll talk about consumables first. You're going to need to bring infused health pots, regen pots, and mana pots. A lot of mana pots. You do not want to tap your Void Gauntlet for mana just to get it back, because it's going to waste time and global cooldowns in which you could be doing damage or healing. Instead, what you want to do is chug a mana pot really quickly, especially after a dodge. It seems to go a little bit more smoothly when you do so. Other things you may need are going to be the infused weapon coatings, which are going to increase your damage. Yes, your damage does matter on both your Void Gauntlet and your Life Staff. You're not just healing, you are contributing to the group overall. You also need a powerful Honing Stone, which will increase your weapon damage once again, and then to have a few Oak Flesh Bombs for if you get jumped by a few monsters and your tank can't quite get to it. This can be quite nice. Generally, elemental damage is something that you can deal with through gems and other sources, so you don't have to worry about that too much. The only other thing I may keep on me would be infused corruption tinctures as well as blight tinctures, because sometimes in the higher rated mutated dungeons, you may have to rely on these to get an extra edge, and it is very valuable to do so. Make sure you have a 40 Constitution rabbit food or a mix of Constitution and Focus if your build requires that. Whatever you do, just make sure you get to that 300, 200 stat breakdown that we talked about previously. And that should be it for consumables, as well as trophies for the Angry Earth, Ancient enemies, as well as the Corrupted enemies, which are the 3 current mutated dungeons that we have in the game. Make sure you have trophies in your houses for each of those. All right, now we are going to go ahead and jump into gems, and this will be mitigation for your armor. As you can see, I have Void on my armor here. I have a few pieces. Void, for some reason, gives higher than any other element. The only reason I would put Void in is when it's Eternal Week, so you need to gem for the dungeon appropriately. If it would be Hellfire Week, I would then put in the Pristine Rubies and get fire damage reduction on my gear pieces. But whatever you do, make sure that the total of your damage reduction is equal to the amount of fortify that you have, because you cannot pass a 50% fortify cap. So no matter what you do, even with gems or ward or whatever you may want to do, if you're getting protection from other sources, you can only go up to 50%. I know for a fact that I have 10% protection coming in from my Orb of Protection. Whenever I heal any ally with it, I will get that buff for 30 seconds, and it's coming back all the time, so I know it's up permanently. And whenever I light attack any monster, I get another 15% from the Protector's Touch. So that means that I have 25% reduction to all sources at any given time that I can reliably count on. I will not count on my Sacred Ground because that will most likely be on the tank, and I don't want to be standing on top of the tank as a healer. That's not ideal. So moving forward into that means that I need about 25% resistance to whatever the element is I am dealing with in that week. So whether that's fire or void or maybe even ice and nature in the future, when we see those different mutation comes out, that's going to change up the way you do things. Make sure you have that. As you can see in the bottom left, I have 24.6 void resistance, which is enough for an eternal week, allowing me to hit the cap threshold of 50%. Anything extra after that would be good to have, like an onyx gem or maybe like a diamond gem or something in there. I know jewelry is hard to put gems in because most good jewelry is crafted and not found, so your options are limited. People usually use diamonds or onyx or something like that in order to craft their jewelry because they want something that can sell to people. So whatever you have to deal with for your jewelry is what you should go in for, but I would lean towards physical resistance, probably diamonds or onyx, to get some extra resistance outside of the elemental cap once you pass that. So now that we have talked about gems, we are now going to go into weapons. After that, we're going to go into armor and then jewelry. So let's talk about weapons. So weapons, we will talk about perks first before we kind of go real deep into this weapon section. So perks are going to be important. Skill perks are something to look out for. There are a few skill perks that you need to take note of. You must have, it is mandatory that you have the skill perk for Sacred Ground. It is going to put a 10% fortified buff on anybody standing in the Sacred Ground, which means your tank and any melee in the area, and is very, very important. The next thing that you're going to need to have is called Mending Protection, which is going to be a perk for the Orb of Protection that will increase your healing when you heal a target below half by a large amount for a decent duration, which is going to be very powerful and add to your overall performance as a healer. And then the final talent you will need is the Beacon perk. The perk for Beacon will allow you to get a powerful self buff on healing, about 38 to 40%, whenever you just cast the Beacon. That's all you have to do is cast it, and you will get that buff. You will heal yourself, only yourself, for more healing. I've heard some issues that it's a little bit buggy and increases a little bit of healing overall besides just the self-healing. I don't know what's going on there, but hey, we'll take it, right? More healing, the better. So those are the 3 mandatory perks for skills that we must have. And then we will talk about perks on the actual items themselves. So when we talk about a life staff, the thing that makes a good life staff is having Refreshing Move and Blessed. Blessed is a buff that gives you 20% more healing. Unfortunately, I don't have a life staff on the PTR with Blessed here, but I do have one in game when I actually heal. So Blessed and Refreshing Move are the first 2 go-tos for the perks. After that, the third perk choice is pretty much your preference. Some people like cooldown, like the Will of the Ancients comes with cooldown. Personally, I like crit chance, and it seems a little weird. I know the crit multiplier for life staff is a little bit low, low, but the auto attacks can hit hard, especially with crit. And on top of that, you can also crit with Orb of Protection and Beacon. When you hit enemies with it, it does a significant amount of damage. I've hit for 2.5k, I've hit for 3k, and that's a lot of damage, especially coming from a healer. I know some of you hammer users are out there hitting for 8k, 10k, but trust me, this damage adds up, and you're going to appreciate a good healer doing good damage. So I preference crit as the third perk. That one is completely up to you. Anything in there would be acceptable, because the third perk, it doesn't matter too much for life staff, to be honest. So then we have the Void Gauntlet. The Void Gauntlet has a couple of nice perks that you can put in there, but the best perks for them is going to be Keen, which is going to be crit chance, and then Vicious. Vicious is going to be crit damage, and then your final choice would probably be Keenly Empowered, which is a buff when you crit, or Keenly Jagged, which is a bleed over time when you crit, which is also good because you seldomly switch to your Void Gauntlet, so it comes in that nice cooldown window of like 10 seconds. It seems to work out pretty nicely. But the most important thing is making sure you have crit chance on it, because the refund on the cooldowns from the Void Gauntlet comes from critting with the Void Gauntlet. The more you crit, the more cooldowns you will get back, and you will be able to cast more Oblivions, which means better uptime and damage for your team, as well as a bunch of other factors. Speaking of the Void Gauntlet, there are 2 perks that you can get. The Diminishing Orb perk for skills, and the Oblivion perk, the Nullifying Oblivion perk. Both of these just reduce the duration of buffs on a target, and there are some monsters that do put buffs on them. So having these 2 perks on your armor pieces with the 3 perks from Life Staff is ideal, but it's not exactly optimal, because a mage can also get these perks, so maybe it's not your job, right? But if you want to go the extra mile and have perfect perks on all armor, that could be the way to go. All right, next we are going to be taking a look at armor pieces. Now, armor pieces, I don't have a lot of this on the PTR, but I do have some of it. Refreshing Evasion is the most important perk for a healer. It will allow you to gain 1% of your cooldowns back after you exit the dodge animation. And with the medium armor build, which we'll talk about here in a second, you will be dodging a lot in between all of your autos, in between your spells. And if you do that, you will be able to cast twice, 3 times as much healing as you would before. It is the single most powerful healing buff in the game, so having Refreshing Evasion, which does stack on each armor piece and jewelry piece, is very, very crazy. If you have 5 armor pieces in total and 3 jewelry pieces, so you can get up to 8% refreshed cooldown whenever you dodge, which means your Sacred Ground, your Beacon, and your Orb will all be coming back extremely fast, especially when you pair it with the Life Staff's built-in passive of 5% cooldowns when you light attack, and 2.9 coming from Refreshing Move. You will constantly be regaining your cooldowns, and you'll be able to spam out heals like you pretty much have no cooldowns, right? And so this is going to be the most important thing. The next important thing is going to be in the medium category, because we want enough armor to survive any monsters that may stray shoot us or drop a spell on us or get aggro on us temporarily. We need to be able to live a little bit long, and if you're in a glass cannon build, it's going to be hard to do. You will also get 15% increased healing and 10% bonus damage. Yes, getting in light is ideal for max healing and damage bonus, but it doesn't seem super realistic in the high level elite difficulties. It may be if you have a tip-top speed run group and everything is rehearsed and perfected to the max. But I think medium is going to be your best route to go for progression and ease and everything else. So that's what I'm going to go with here. I may adjust that over time if I feel like I can get away with light, but we'll see how it goes. So after that, the only other thing that you would be looking for is going to be that Refreshing Evasion plus a good perk like Mending Protection or Fortifying Sacred Ground, Revitalizing Beacon, or one of the Void Gauntlet perks. And then after that, you could look for something like Vigor, which would reduce burns and bleeds. There are a lot of them in the Mutated dungeons, or Invigorated. That is also a good perk to have as well. So now we will finally dip into the jewelry, which we're going to talk about the Amulet at first. The best stats for the Amulet is going to be Refreshing Evasion, of course. This is mandatory on all pieces, but Health is a very powerful move or perk to have. It will increase your health by 10%, and Divine is also nice as well. Divine will give you 10% increased incoming healing on yourself, so it is a nice thing to have. So ultimately, you're going to be looking for Divine, Health, Refreshing Evasion, plus good stat being con or focus, and that's going to apply to armor and weapons as well. Just make sure you have that balance, 300, 200. The next we're going to talk about is Ring, and this one will be a little bit interesting. So the best stat or perk to have on your ring is Sacred, which will increase your outgoing healing by a flat amount, 8.6 in this case, which is very powerful. The next best thing to have is Refreshing Evasion. So those are going to be the two mandatories. And then the third is your choice, but I think that Keen Awareness, the crit chance, is the best to have. Because when you have it on your ring, it's going to help give you cooldowns back when you fire off your Void Gauntlet Orb of Decay, which means you're going to crit more often, which means more cooldowns are coming back, and you can do some weird, crazy, permanent Orb of Decay stuff. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but it's really spicy in the high-level dungeons. You can do a lot of damage. You can do crazy amounts of healing, and it's kind of nutty to see, not going to lie. So that's going to be Sacred plus Refreshing Evasion, and then Keen Awareness, crit chance. So now we're going to go on to the earring. The best earring perks to have is going to be Refreshing Toast, which will recharge your cooldowns 30% faster, roughly, for potions. This is going to be really, really good. And then you will want Regenerating, which is going to regenerate a portion of your max health, because this combined with the passive healing that you're going to be getting from Protection or Orb of Protection, because you're healing anybody else with it, it's going to go onto you. You pretty much don't have to heal yourself ever, right? Unless you're in major trouble, any poke damage or sustained damage on you is completely mitigated by this. So it's definitely fantastic to have. And then, of course, Refreshing Evasion. I'll say it again. I'll say it 1,000 times. Healer, Refreshing Evasion. And in fact, damage dealers do a lot with Refreshing Evasion, and we'll get into that when we talk about some of other guides in the series. So with that being said, we have all of those perks that have now been covered. I hope this guide helps a little bit for the healers out there, and then we'll briefly talk about like what you want to do ideally. So what I generally do when I'm in a dungeon is I'll start off and I'll see where my tank is trying to go. So I'll just dodge forward real fast to get the passive bonus active from the Bend Light. And then I'll just fire off my orb on the tank to make sure he has the heal over time and protection, and probably hit him with the beacon as well, because wherever he's going is most likely where all of our melee is going to go, so they're going to need to get healed by that as well. And if I can also hit the monster that I know he's going for, that's going to be ideal. So I just want to do that. And in between each attack, I want to dodge. So I want to attack, dodge, because every time I do that, I'm going to get my refreshing cooldown going. And if this was the live server, like I have on live, I have all 8 pieces refreshing evasion, I would be able to get all my cooldowns back instantly. So that's going to be the good go-to, and once the tank has finally settled on his location to nuke the enemies down, I would then place my Sacred Ground. So there's a few things you could do with this. Your Sacred Ground can target the ally, but there is also a hotkey that you can set up that will allow you to target your Sacred Ground into any position that you want. You can kind of like aim it on the ground wherever you want, and I'll go ahead and give you an example of that right now. So for me, it's the middle mouse button, and once I do that, I can now aim my Sacred Ground wherever I want. So sometimes I put it in a spot where I know my tank is going to go, or a location that's good for that. All right, so in summary, with the life staff, it's going to go a little something like this. I'm going to dodge forward, I'm going to shoot, and then press orb, shoot, press beacon, dodge again, and then press my Sacred Ground, and then keep dodging, shoot, dodge. You can sometimes shoot twice between dodge, because that's what it'll be for your stamina, but also make note that whenever you shoot an attack, you can immediately trigger a cooldown like orb to kind of reset your attack animation. So if I do this, you can see I just shot twice there real fast, bam, bam, and that would allow me to shoot off 2 of my attacks. So if I have a cooldown, I'll press auto attack plus E, then dodge. And if I don't have any cooldown, like if I have orb, I'll dodge again, but if I have nothing, then I'll just shoot twice and then dodge. And what you want to try to do is line up your shots to make sure that, like, if this was my tank and this was the enemy, I want to heal my tank by passing through him and then hitting my enemy and then maintaining that dodge. So the goal is to never have max stamina, because you want to keep getting your cooldowns back from dodging constantly, and then making sure that you use all your heal over times on cooldown and you're hitting the monster for big DPS. Then we'll talk about the Void Gauntlet style play. So the best way to do is to close the gap while doing the life staff here, and then we want to get in kind of close and then press Oblivion to make sure that's in radius for our team. You can also have your ranged near you to get the benefit from this as well, so if you want to play more back, you can do that. Hitting your Essence Rupture on the target is just a little skill shot that'll allow Life Leech. I only use this for big bosses or hard enemies, especially enemies in big groups. And then passing an Orb of Decay through the group and passing that healing back onto your group is very powerful. The heal over time effect from the Orb of Decay is very, very strong. And if you land it on your tank or a big group of mobs, oftentimes the cooldown will be instantly reset just from the pure amount of mobs that you're hitting with the orb. And you can always explode it if you want to fine tune it. But what I usually do is just press out all the Void Gauntlet skills and then I immediately switch, chug my potion, and then I'm back into Life Staff, and I keep maintaining all of my Life Staff DPS and healing cooldowns and just top everyone off like that. A couple of nice strategies to do would be to make note that your Sacred Ground is most likely for the tanks. So when you are healing, your Sacred Ground needs to be on the tank because he feels the most comfortable. It's going to give him protection, and it's going to give him that constant healing source. When I'm healing the tank, I make sure I shoot orb into melee range because that's going to give them all the B buff. But if I want to, I'll put the beacon right next to myself on the ground and have my ranged players play around this area as well, because healing them is a little bit difficult, right? Like getting them to walk into the sacred in the middle of the tank is going to be hard. So placing the beacon to heal your ranged, the orb and the sacred to heal your melee is a good way to go about it, especially for mixed or dynamic groups. This is going to be your best result. So that being said, I hope this helps kind of let you understand how the Void Gauntlet and the Life Staff are being played as a high-level healer in these dungeons and instances. This is going to be good all the way into elite difficulty, and I hope that this all gives you a great idea on how to build it, how to play it, and what to do with it. Thanks for your time in watching this video, everyone. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button. We also have a join button if you're interested in becoming a member today, and a Discord and a Twitter in the description link, just in case you're interested in following on social media. That's going to be it for this one, everyone. Thanks for your time watching, and we will see you in the next video.